So welcome today to our Wellness Wednesdays. This is the third in our series. Today's is Women Face a Second Layer of Pressure. And it's hosted today by our Platinum partner, Metcon. I have to go to, there we go. So I really want to thank Metcon TI for their support of this event. They are one of our Platinum partners. And we want to also ask everybody to, if you feel comfortable, to put your camera on and to please mute yourself if you're not talking. We are going to be using the chat function for our questions. And we haven't done an evaluation yet. I'm going to do one for the full series, so that'll be coming out as well. So I'd like to introduce our facilitators. We have Jeff Hurt, who's the Chief Epiphany Officer for Empowered Epiphanies. Man, that's a good tongue twister I could have done in elementary school, Jeff Freak.
Yep.
Jeff is a very noted digital and engagement learning specialist. He is a transformationist in my book, because he helps us transform our mundane association content to these engaging, thought-provoking, empowering talks, and has really changed behaviors in some of the associations I've worked with in the past. Dee O'Neill is our other facilitator. She's a founder of Neurocognitive Fitness. She's a psychologist, neuroscientist, and she really helps people to look at how their brain works and how to make it work better, especially in these times that we're all dealing with COVID-19 and shelter in place and opening and closing and being a homeschooler and a parent and everything in between. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. We are going to be having a trivia contest for this that Metcon is putting in. I do have to probably say the Metcon employees probably shouldn't answer the question because you probably know it, but we'll see how many people we have on this. The first, we're going to do it at the end of the talk. The first person who gets the answer right will either win a $50 Starbucks card or a round of golf with Tyler or Nick. So, I mean, if you're a golfer, it might be a fun thing. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to give it all over to Jeff and Dee. So on with the show.
All right. So let me pull up mine. No. And let's make it big. Women face a second layer of pressure. Good midday, I guess, those of you in California, mid-morning. And this is going to be an interesting one because it's about some research about the pressure that men and women face and also how men and women's brains are a little bit different. On the second layer of pressure that men don't have and why men should care. I want to thank you for your participation today. I want to thank you in advance for your mental engagement. You'll get out of this what you put into it. And what I mean by that is because we're going to ask you lots of questions, ask you to participate through the text chat. And I want to know, where are you? Type in your city and tell me what your weather's like where you are. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and our weather is in the 70s. It's been raining for the past couple days. You have 70-degree weather in Dallas is unusual. And Julie, I'll let you or Dee, either one of you can read them as they come in, comments. Good to see those of you without the dark orange skies.
San Jose, beautiful blue skies. Campbell, and it's lovely out. Orinda, sunny and gorgeous. Oakland, it's sunny and gorgeous. Clear and gorgeous in Walnut Creek. Pleasant in Pleasanton. San Francisco, beautiful and in the 60s. Oakland, sunny and a nice temperature.
Great. So I'm going to start all my presentations the same way. We want to make an agreement with you and hope you'll make the same agreement with us, a presenter-attendee agreement. We believe in the law of the click. This presentation veers in a direction that doesn't meet your needs. You get a text, you get a phone call, just need to get up, or it's not working for you. You're adults, take care of your needs. You can click on out of this presentation, do something that's a little bit more valuable to you. Put those mobile devices on vibrate. Many of you have 2 and 3 of these sitting around you right now. Put them on vibrate, please. This is a session where you can text, type, social share anything that Dee or I share. Please don't social share anything anybody else shares unless they give you permission. Just as some guidelines, if anybody's going to be using Twitter, tweet anything out from this presentation, we ask you to use the golden rule. Tweet into others as you would have them tweet into you. Tweet something good from the presentation before you tweet anything bad. Let's make understanding our goal. What the research from Institute for Human Health and Potential found about this second layer of pressure that men don't have but that women do. Let's make our goal understanding this. And I'm going to declare this as a safe space to agree, disagree, ponder, and question. This is a place where you can push back, you can throw it against the wall, figure out what's going on. And finally, you get a free pass. If I ask you to do something you don't want to do it, just know you can use this free pass as frequently and as often as you want. So if that works for you, will you type in a Y? If it doesn't work for you, will you type in a no? If you're unsure, just type in a U as unsure. Give you a couple of seconds to do that.
I think you're getting lots of Y's there, Jeff.
Okay, good. So about you, my favorite fall activity is blank. Those of you that are in a room with more than 2 or 3 people, just shout out some answers to somebody who's closest to the computer and they can type in some responses. My favorite fall activity is what? What is your favorite fall activity to do? I'll tell you what mine is, although it's not going to happen this year.
Oh,
I know. Texas State Fair.
Oh. I thought you were going to say dressing up for the trick-or-treaters in front of your house.
I'm in a new home, in a new neighborhood.
Okay. All right.
I don't think Halloween's going to happen in Dallas this year.
So we have quite a few answers. A lot of them, I think I want to head over to Sandra's and Ellen's house for baking apple and pear desserts, football, spin, baking, and then eating the baked goods. I know where Lee lives, so you might find me on her doorstep soon. Trick-or-treating, yarn, riding horses and baking. All right, Roxanne, I know where to go out that way. Celebrating Halloween, decorating the house for fall and Halloween, handing out candy to trick-or-treaters, and carving pumpkins.
What about you?
So for me, I would say, and especially being here in Dallas, being in the South, football. My nephew's first game is this Friday night. So Friday night lights are kind of a big deal here, and I actually look forward to it.
Okay. So as Julie alluded to, that one of my favorite activities used to be sitting on my front porch in the other home that I lived in. I just moved a couple of months ago. But that home, last year there was 1,024 people who came by to do trick-or-treating. My neighbor kept count. And you literally had to sit on the front porch and you could not move. Everybody on our block, we would get up and turn the lights off at the same time, and the police would move the barricades down the street. I don't think I'm going to have that problem this year, but actually there's talk that there's not going to be trick-or-treating in Dallas this year. So here's what I look like. I have 2 Cocker Spaniels, Clay and Bentley. I have an affinity for superheroes, and the brain fascinates me. Just a little bit about myself. And Dee, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yes, we like to talk about our puppies. So my little puppies there, my little mini schnauzers, Boomer and Leilani, brother and sister. They're my fur babies. Professionally, I am obsessed with the brain-behavior relationship. So in my private practice, I work with individuals and corporations to really understand how their brain works collectively and individually, and how we can make our brains work more effectively and efficiently.
Tell them a little bit about your studies when you were in college, because I know you started out in Hawaii.
Yeah, so I went to undergrad and graduate school in Honolulu. I was very lucky that my mom moved us out there in high school, and I was like, well, I think I'll stay here for a long time. I just loved it. And so my first job out of graduate school was through the University of Hawaii, was an HIV/AIDS research study, looking at a very specific type of dementia that tends to accompany some late stages of AIDS or HIV positive individuals. So became fascinated just by how our brains are such amazing, strong sort of organs in our body, but are also quite vulnerable under certain circumstances. And that's really where my passion started.
So I met Dee, Dee, how long has it been now?
I think it's about 5 years ago, at least.
At least 5 years ago. I took a workshop at the Center for Brain Health and Brain Performance Institute that Dee was leading. And if anybody knows me well, they know that I'm very finicky about workshops that I'm going to go to attend, just as an educator by trade. And I knew within the first 30 seconds to a minute that this was going to be a brilliant workshop, that Dee understood learning and the natural biology of the brain when it came to learning. She just had the skill set and had it, and ended up taking 2.5 days with her and learned quite a bit. So she's become a good friend. Here's where some of this research is coming from. I want you to always kind of have this information. Institute for Health and Human Potential, they're based out of Canada. They also have offices in Chicago. They have this whole series of research about women under pressure, and also that teams benefit when men and women collaborate. And we're going to touch on this a little bit. And then the book, Performing Under Pressure. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to elaborate on what is unique about a woman's brain and why that difference is important to successful organizations. We're going to expound on the second layer of pressure that women face and how it is different from the pressure that men face. And we're going to explore how to better manage stressors, which is fast becoming an organization's competitive advantage, being able to manage your stressors, which is emotional intelligence. So those are my 3 learner outcomes. By the end of this presentation, I hope you're able to do one of them. Here they are. 1, 2, and 3. Take a look at these 3. Figure out which one of these 3 interests you the most and why. Which one of these 3 interests you the most and why? Would you type in 1, 2, or 3? Those of you that are in a room with several people, you can just type in responses as people give them to you. Which one of these 3 interests you the most and why?
We've got a couple 3s, a 2, a 1, another 2, another 1. I should tally these for you, huh?
That's okay. So do we need to make sure we get to the end of the presentation where the 4 tips are on how to manage stressors?
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line. So what do we do about it?
Yeah.
And it's just,
you have a really good mix, Jeff, of all of them, actually.
it's just interesting. The brain always wants the quick tips, the high notes, the takeaways. That's just the way our brain is built, because it doesn't work as much. It doesn't have to think as much. But what Dee and I will tell you is the more you think and the more you actively engage mentally with some of this information, the more you retain. So it's just kind of the opposite. So why would this presentation be important to you? What's the magic carrot in it for you? Well, for organizations to be successful, they need both male and female perspectives when making decisions. This is what IHHP researchers found, and several other researchers since then. For organizations to be successful, they need both male and female perspectives when making decisions. Teams that are balanced outperform all male or all female teams by large margins. Kind of an interesting. Teams that are balanced outperform all male or female teams by large margins. This is from Women Under Pressure, IHHP. Any organization that is all female or all male has inherent weaknesses right off the bat. Your turn. What stresses you? Type in some responses of what stresses you. What stresses you? What stresses you? I know.
What stresses me, and it's hard for me to not know how we define stress, but I think just feeling a lack of control and maybe just too much happening, too little time, too much to do.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff, we're hearing multiple demands. I put in distance learning because it's just killing me as my teenager right now. The unknown, the news, leading a team and having the pressure of setting them up for success. So much on the to-do list, never enough time, not having all the information required to doing something properly.
Ouch. We're all feeling that pressure now with all these stressors.
Mm-hmm. I think I could check off each one of these.
Absolutely. So, Dee, will you recap for us how the body reacts to stress and what the body actually goes through when it perceives something as a threat? Will you recap?
Sure. Yeah, and we covered this a little bit in the first couple of series, so if folks haven't seen it, then you'll be able to go back and look at that in more detail. But just to kind of zoom out first to how we define stress from a brain perspective, more specifically, we've sort of adapted this from one of our collaborators, Dr. Ian Robertson, out of, he's in England, or sorry, he's in Ireland. And the way we're defining stress is the feeling that the demands made on you exceed your capacity to deal with them. which I think the two key ideas there are the feeling, because it's how we're interpreting stress. I feel like I've been seeing so much about this idea that it's not so much what happens to us in life, good or bad, stressful or wonderful, but it's how we respond to it that really signifies the experience of it. And then the second really key word in that definition is capacity. What I know as a brain scientist and just years in this field is the old idea that we thought that the brain we were born with was what we were kind of stuck with. We now know through the science of neuroplasticity and brain science and imaging studies that actually our brain is very dynamic, and our brain changes every day based on how we're using it. It's either improving, getting better, getting stronger, it's maintaining kind of status quo, or maybe it's going downwards. Maybe it's not improving at all, maybe even decreasing in performance and effectiveness. And so the positive message there is we truly can take power over and impact how our brain performs, just like physical fitness. I love to point out the analogy here in Dallas. The Cooper Fitness Center is here, the Cooper Clinic. Dr. Kenneth Cooper was the founder of the term aerobics, and he almost lost his medical license by saying people should start running and get aerobic exercise. Yeah.
We lost your voice there, but can you tell us about the science of stress? What the brain goes through when it is feeling stress?
Yeah, and so what we know, and I'd love people to think about that for a second, when you're in a stressful situation, think about what you notice. You don't have to type it in, but think about what do you feel in your body? Most people report things like their heartbeat increases, their pulse increases. People react a little bit differently. You might feel sweaty. You might feel more of a dry mouth. You might feel sort of a brain fog, can't think clearly. Think about a time you've been stressed out in an argument or in a pressure situation. Maybe said things you wish you hadn't said, or didn't have the right words to finish your sentence. And so what's happening in our body is that our systems are kind of going into overdrive to help us handle that stress. We sense that something's happening, the pressure is increasing, and so our body is trying to help us. It's increasing our heart rate so we have more blood flow, because historically, when we were in threat situations, being chased by a tiger in the savannah, we had to run from that tiger. We needed blood to go to our leg muscles to help us run. So that same phenomenon happens. Blood flow increases to our larger muscles, but it leaves our extremities. So blood leaves our hands and our feet, goes to our legs, but our head, our brain is also an extremity. So blood literally leaves our brain when we're actually under really pressure-filled situations. And so we'll talk more about ways to recognize, notice that reaction, that physiological, physical, normal, natural response, but how we can then engage a couple of strategies to help actually use that to our advantage.
Yeah, and from the last webinar we did, when you're having an emotional hijack, or when you're feeling perceiving stress, perceiving threats, you end up in the limbic system of your brain, the emotional part of your brain, and you can't operate out of the frontal lobes, the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is where you're making decisions. The two cannot operate at the same time, so it's one or the other. And that becomes a challenge because the decisions we make when we are threatened are not logical decisions. They're about saving the body. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we move forward?
Yeah, that either or phenomenon, either our frontal lobe is engaged or that amygdala, the limbic emotional response takes over. That's why we might say things we wish we hadn't said, or we can't think clearly because the emotional part is taking over. People have heard the terms probably emotional hijack. Literally, they don't have access to their better thinking when they're under a lot of stress. And the other kind of things that happens to our body is we start really shallow breathing, because again, we're under that fight or flight or freeze response. And then what we want to do is flip the switch to be able to calm down that response so that we have access to our better thinking.
So the women face a second layer of pressure that deals in this regard. So we're going to talk about here. Some of the differences between women and men's brains, and it's according to research from IHHP and some of their researchers, the hippocampus is a key area of the brain for memory and decision making. Do you want to add anything about this, about the hippocampus? Because I've got a picture of it there. as well.
Yeah, I love brain pictures. I don't know if you guys are much neuroscience nerds as me, but I kind of light up when I see images like this. And the hippocampus is a small structure deep within the brain. It's most recognized for being our memory and learning center, and even that short-term decision making. So it's key in being an effective leader.
Okay. And in women, the hippocampus is larger, and when feeling pressure and anxiety, it receives more blood flow than men's brains do. According to IHHP, this helps women be more effective at processing and coding emotional experiences into long-term memories, recall intricate, complex physical details needed during decision-making, and to link experiences. Anything you'd like to add here, Dee?
I think one important idea, and this helps sort of, I think, drive home this message, if you think about your past life experiences, and your memories are probably really clear at times, experiences that were very emotionally driven. For me, I can think back to a car accident I was in several years ago where literally time slowed down. My brother was driving, my sister-in-law in the front, my husband and I in the back seat, and we all looked up and saw this car just barreling towards us, running a red light. And I remember just almost like in slow motion, my hands going up into the air, noticing a telephone pole that I was sure we were going to slam into. And the reason that happens is that hippocampus, the memory center, is right next to the amygdala. So that emotional center is right next to in the brain, next to the memory center. So very heightened emotional experiences lock in and are deeply embedded within our memories. And that can be negative experiences, but also really positive ones. When you think about really exciting, positive emotional experiences that you've had, those are probably also very top of mind as well. So that's why they're so closely linked between memory. And even another interesting brain science concept is smell. The smell center is also really close to there, the olfactory bulb. And so when you notice, maybe you smell something, like for me, it's maybe smelling cookies baking. It reminds me of my mom when she used to bake. So you may have certain scents that also automatically take you back to some experience that is very highly emotional for you.
Thank you. So women have more fully developed prefrontal cortex, thus providing better context of a situation during problem solving. And they have nearly 10 times more white matter than men. Talk to us about white matter in the brain, Dee.
So white matter, think of it as the connecting roads between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The brain is often, that image you saw a minute ago, it's more the gray matter, which is the cortex of the brain. If you've seen what a brain looks like, it's often gray because it truly is gray. But the white matter is the corpus callosum is what it's called actually, and it's the bridge between the left and right hemisphere. And that's why women's brains tend to be thought of as being a little bit different in stressful situations, because there's a quicker sort of speed of connection between what's thought of as our emotional right side of the brain and our more logical or reasoning left side of the brain. So we're more quickly to access the emotional content in situations, particularly when there's a lot of pressure and stress around them.
So that leads to that women can actually weigh more variables during decision making, consider more options, see more context, and connect more brain areas, as Dee was just talking about, and visualize a wider array of solutions and options. I hope you're beginning to see how important it is to have women on the team, women at a committee that may be serving on or working with you. Men have a tendency to develop tunnel vision, and they focus on short-term or one goal. Now, when would focusing on a short-term goal be appropriate for an organization? When would it be a benefit? Would you type in a response for me? When would it be a benefit of focusing on a short-term goal? There's something that happens in most businesses that is a regular thing, but this actually is a benefit for them. Julie, what do you think?
Well, I haven't gotten any responses, so everybody start typing, please. When a decision must be made quickly, or I put crisis situation. Not a lot of time to evaluate options.
Well, so the benefits of tunnel vision is good for short-term goals such as quarterly finance targets. Really good in those arenas, short-term goals. But it's not good for long-term goals or more complex and vague situations. So there's kind of a counterbalance here. At work, what pressures do you face on a daily basis at work? What pressures do you face at a daily basis on work? We'll type in those. That's an easier question for you. You want to be honest with us. What pressures do you face? Some of them are going to be similar to what stressors you talked about. I know for many of us, it's having to do more with less, faster.
Financial reporting deadlines, having answers to questions on the spot. I find that too. It's that I get a question and it's like, oh, I need time to process that one.
Well, I know another one for many people is productivity and being as productive as we can when the research shows us we need to spend some time thinking and processing, which leads to better, more effective productivity.
Keeping all projects moving forward at the same time.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You know, and the whole thing of keeping your focus on the short term while also focused on the long term is a challenge. So work pressures, many of us deal with deadlines, goals, managing change, too much to do in too little time with too few resources, and managing personal and professional lives, the dance between the two. The IHHP study of 6,000 women found that women face significant second level of pressure in the workplace that has a potential to diminish their influence and their careers. So just without having read the reports or the research, or maybe you have, what do you think are some of those pressures that women face that men don't? Take a stab at it. Type in some responses. What do you think are some of those pressures that women face that men don't? This one will be kind of interesting. Dee, how about you? Do you want to respond to that? I know you've seen that.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, my idea on this has changed in the last year as I've gone through this year-long leadership program here that's mostly men. And I think I find that when men sort of, or high-powered, especially CEO type of leadership positions, let their walls down, I think there's a lot of similar ones once they're more vulnerable to talk about it. But what comes to mind for me is sort of this imposter syndrome, this idea that many of us feel, I think male and female, but more specific to women I see day to day, is that we feel like we're in a position, especially of leadership, where maybe we feel like that imposter syndrome, like once they find out who I really am or what I really know, that they'll question it. That can be one, but also just the personal pressures of home life being a constant pull as well.
There you go. Jilly, read something.
Yeah. Okay, we have a few here for you. Let's see. More organized, so expected to do more. Keeping the career and household at the same time. Sexist expectations and navigating around them. Self-regulating the appearance of all our emotions. That we have to explain ourselves more than men do. And leading with authenticity without being seen as emotional.
Wow, those are some great ones. And I think you're going to see the report which bears this out. Working in mostly male teams or under mostly male leadership is a second level of stressor for women. Dealing with more aggressive male behaviors and how women are perceived if they respond accordingly with those same behaviors. The need to be perfect and not make mistakes, because we've got to live up to what the males have already done. Sometimes we have to feel like women feel like they have to outperform the men just to be able to be even with them. The salary gap and lack of opportunities for promotion, and the work-life balance, as many of you have said. IHHP found that women don't want to be treated differently than men or seen as complaining. So that's just kind of a quick overview, very fast, of some of the areas that women face pressure that men don't.
Jeff, we had one more comment that came in a little late, and I wanted to make sure we
Go for it.
you started talking. I didn't want to interrupt you. I knew you probably had 3 or 4 steps, because I know you know that we can only manage 3 or 4 things in a time to process. So here we go. Confidently self-starting tasks on projects without a lot of direction, appearance and attire, not showing too much cleavage, too street, not enough softness. What does this color say, et cetera, et cetera. And keeping a balance between facial expression, underlying emotions. Emotion removes the sense of control that men seem to exude full time.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because oftentimes the second layer of pressure that women face hits their confidence level and causes them to feel less than or to over exaggerate. You're going to find this out in some of the ways to manage this as well, that they see things and start obsessing about it. Now, men can do this as well, but it seems to be that women do it a lot more. And this research is really interesting, and men need to understand this about women and help them get promoted, because the research also shows that the more the teams are equally balanced and have both perspectives from the male and the females, because there are those positive things about the female brain that men don't have, that we can be more successful in our organizations. So Dee, here's where I'm going to really lean on you, because we're going to go into 4 stress management tips for both men and women. We're going to start out looking at it from a women's perspective as well, but these work for both sexes. Downsize the importance of a situation. I don't know if you're like me ever, but sometimes you have a deadline or something's coming up, or you have a meeting, maybe a Zoom call that you got to do. Yet you need to pick up the kids, or you need to go to a parent-teacher conference, or you got to take somebody to the orthodontist. And you get worried about, but if I miss this meeting, they're going to fire me. And we go to the far extreme side of it. I can't miss this meeting because they're going to fire me. So we have to downsize the importance of the situation. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Sure. And just to kind of highlight again that long, wonderful comment from Roxanne that Julie just read, I think that highlights so many important issues. And we could probably talk about this for a full day workshop. There's so much here that we're trying to sort of deep dive into just a couple of key takeaways. But I think it is so important to recognize that there's the reality of the situation, and we've all worked in those situations, those workplaces where this was really kind of obvious that these kind of things were actually taking place. And then maybe in other situations where was it our interpretation of the situation? I know I've been able to kind of step back and say, is this happening, or am I telling myself a story about what's happening? So sort of somewhat of that ownership of the situation, just puts it in our corner a little bit. So I think this number one takeaway of downsizing the importance goes back to the stress tip we talked about. The first talk that we did for BOMA was this idea of reframing, and really just for our own ability to be more present, to be more mindful, to be more effective in the situation. So rather than, I've been in those situations at work where I feel like maybe I've had bosses even in the recent few months of like, oh, look at Dee's face. She must be irritated by what I'm saying. And I would be caught off guard. And then I'm sort of derailing about the comment that was just made. Sort of, I think men sometimes make, what I've seen in this situation was making it to be joking or to try to make a laughing situation, but I've never heard that comment made to a male colleague. And so recognizing in the moment that it felt inappropriate, and then sort of targeted. At the same time, though, trying to refocus to go back to the task at hand. So really reframing it to, what are we working on? What's the problem that we're trying to solve? And then maybe processing it later and being, for myself, trying to be more brave to go back to that person later to say, trying to get to the bottom of the comment. So really downsizing is really just how do we reframe it for our own perspective to be more effective in the moment.
I think that's a great tip. And the more importance we put onto a situation, the more anxiety we may experience, thus resulting in distorted thinking and increased errors and a lack of focus. And it's all about that reframing it and lessen the pressure by minimizing the significance of the situation. So in the situation that I use, if I miss this meeting to pick up the kids, they will fire me. Then reframe it to, I would rather not miss this meeting. However, I will follow up afterward to get the information that I missed, get the updates, and stay on top of it so that you give yourself an out. And the example that Dee just used, she has a high level of emotional intelligence. She was able to manage her emotions during that kind of being fired barb at and maintain it, and then come back with a logical response so that she could reframe it and think about it and not let it impact her that much then and there. And that's the importance of emotional intelligence. This is also important for men to understand because this happens to both of us, both men and women. So, and if you have questions, folks, type them in as we're going through this. Number 2, embrace imperfection. You don't need to be perfect. Many women feel that in order to compete against men, they must be perfect. You can't be perfect, so don't try. When you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up over it. Most men don't. So there's just kind of a different situation. Embrace imperfection. You are perfectly imperfect. Dee, anything you want to talk about this with what you know about managing stress?
Yeah, I mean, and just to bring in some of that brain science again, and Jeff, you've said to me more than once over the last few years that we've done speaking engagements together, like, Dee, you're overthinking it. I definitely overthink things. I want them to be, I mean, quote unquote, perfect, right? What is perfect? Again, that's a judgment probably being made on something. And so just really recognizing that I think in today's world, professionally and personally, I'm seeing higher value placed on sort of authenticity and vulnerability as opposed to perfection. In this staying in leadership program I'm in, they had this wonderful saying, permission to be messy. And so when we're posting on the e-journal, I feel like even my post to my colleagues needs to be like proper grammar and proper wording and everything. But just recognizing that everyone's so busy, no one's really reading things so carefully anyway. And so not putting as much pressure on ourselves and recognizing this idea that you've probably heard the saying, our biggest strength can be our biggest weakness at times too. So that really highly connected right and left brain, seeing all perspectives, being able to connect and noticing emotions, managing all of those things can be a strength. But in some cases, maybe it's a weakness when it sort of is a self-sabotaging perspective as opposed to driving us forward.
Okay, thank you. Number 3, focus on what you can control. Focus on what you can control. Avoid obsessing on the uncontrollable because it intensifies your pressure and boosts your anxiety, releasing a whole horde of chemicals in the brain that just flood the body and cause you to feel emotionally hijacked. This results in physiology creating distracting thoughts that undermine your confidence. You can't control family commitments that interfere with work. You just can't do it. However, focus on what you can control, which is your attitude and your response to those pressures. And it's always interesting because I know in relationships from time to time, somebody will say, well, you made me do it. And I've always responded with, in relationships I've had, well, if I made you do it, I can make you undo it. Or you made me feel that way, well, I can make you feel happy then, if that is a true statement. And it's all about focusing on what we can control. I can't control the things people say to me, but I can control how I respond to them. We judge people based on their impact on us. And we judge ourselves based on our intentions to them. Listen to that. We judge people based on their impact to us, what they say to us, what they do, but yet we judge ourselves based on our intentions. It's kind of an interesting concept there. Dee, what would you like to add here?
I think one thing that might be interesting to add there is what we can control is our own, as you mentioned, our own reaction to any situation. And also from the brain science perspective, what we can also control is what we're paying attention to. Our attention sometimes can be thought of like a flashlight. You know, it's very back to that tunnel vision idea. Say, going back to that meeting where my boss says to me, "Oh, look at Dee's face. She must be irritated by what I'm saying." I could then hone in on that comment and sort of my irritation around a comment like that, or I can sort of move the spotlight or the flashlight over to the whiteboard or the slide or whatever we're actually working on in the moment, and kind of just disregard that comment and then focus on, more importantly, what we're actually working on in the moment, because it's a distraction, it's an interruption. But I could very easily go down that rabbit hole as well. So we can control our reaction and our responses to things, and also what we pay attention to.
And I think, you know, it also, when we're making those comments, it's something we can control is watching how we make those comments. When we are in a team meeting or in a committee meeting with people, even on a Zoom call, we watch somebody's bodily response look different than what we were expecting, then instead of just automatically assuming it's a negative, saying, hey, D, your face tells me something apprehensive is going on or something's going on. Could you tell me what you're thinking about? And giving them the freedom to talk about whatever they want, or to, if they want to, and to explain to you what they might be responding, or it might be nothing. It may just be totally you misreading them. Number 4.
That's a great point. And Jeff, I would just add to that, that sort of requires emotional intelligence from everyone in the room, right? Everyone sort of stepping away from their own normal, natural responses or reactions to things, and being able to look at things through someone else's perspective.
Yeah.
Well, and Jeff, I just want to, because I think this is a big one for, I know it's a big one for me, and I'm talking to other women, I think that women, you know, run into this probably a lot more than men do. And I think it would be good, you know, maybe when we finish this, if there's other ideas you guys have, because this is a huge issue. I've run into it, and I've actually used one of Jeff's, he did emotional intelligence for us, and I've used one of his comments of like, ow, wow, that hurt, kind of to someone. So, you know, maybe if we have time at the end, just sharing some of those tips might be helpful too.
Well, Julie, you bring up a great one, because when somebody says something to me that comes across to me, its impact on me is piercing. If I can control my emotions, which I can, and I've learned how to manage it, I can't always do it, but normally I will go, ouch, did you mean for that to hurt? And that oftentimes takes them off guard as well, because most of the time they didn't mean for it to be really kind of cutting you off at the knees, but they didn't realize that the statement they were making was one that hurt. And so just identifying it and being upfront and honest with it, going, ouch, did you mean for that to hurt? Really causes that authenticity to be out there. And I'm also one that's quick to ask for forgiveness very quickly. If I offend somebody by something I've said, Julie, you've seen this when I was at CWEA doing trainings. People in the audience would get offended at some of the things I might say when there was never any intention behind it whatsoever, but I would be quick to say, I am so sorry. I apologize for that. Is there a word I could have used instead, or what can I do to help you get over that? And it's kind of an interesting type of situation, but I learned a long time ago to have a successful relationship, I just give in very quickly, because, you know, the brain likes to be right. And I learned that I need to do the opposite and just telling somebody, you're right. You know what? You're right. We don't even have to argue about it. You're 100% right. Let's move on. Let's move forward. It's not about who's right or wrong, but it's about moving forward. But Julie, does the ouch work for you?
It does. I've used it a few times. And it does, because I think it just makes people step back and think about what they said. And I usually get, oh God, I didn't mean it that way. I'm sorry. You know, I just meant that you look like that. You might have had a different idea. And I go, yeah, I do. But I use that a lot. I use it a lot with my teenagers.
Another one that's along similar to that I oftentimes, I always felt like the oddball out when I was serving on a committee, or even in work situations where there'd be a team of us. I always felt like I would be the one who had those thoughts that nobody else wanted to say out loud, or were just kind of odd. And I would learn to say to them, you know, I have a difference of opinion. May I offer it to you? And open it into question of, may I offer it to you? Because if they say yes, then they've already got it bought in to listening to what you're saying. But being able to couch it with, I have a difference of opinion, may I offer it to you? Just couches it very differently. Dee, anything you want to add here to what we're talking about right now?
I think that's such a good point that Julie brings up, because even for myself, I feel like I have all these tools kind of on my tool belt, but in the moment when you are emotionally hijacked, you're still stuck with like, what do I do in this moment? That's sort of that freeze moment, because in a meeting, obviously I'm not one to like fight or can't run out of the meeting. So I might just freeze and not say anything or do anything. So I think it's so helpful to both of your points to have something top of mind to do, and to even say something like, ouch, that requires a certain amount of vulnerability to show that you are willing to recognize that whatever was just said, at some level hurt you. And I remember reading somewhere, hearing someone talk about recently, that we tend to judge others by their behavior, which is our interpretation of what they're doing. But we judge ourselves sometimes by our intention behind our behavior. So I think some of that, saying even ouch, allows you to allows the other person to say, oh no, that wasn't my intention, which I think does take us to a very deeper level of collaboration and communication. A great book by Patrick Lencioni, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, talks about how that type of conflict can actually be really healthy in a workplace, but also personally. So yes, Julie, we will definitely provide a long list of resources and other types of tips and tools to sum up all of the things that we talk about and even go deeper.
Great, thank you.
And the final point, regulate your breathing. Can you speak to this? Because I know this is in your sweet spot.
Yeah, so speaking really about what to do in that moment when you're sort of caught off guard, or you're feeling pressure increasing, and you're feeling your heart rate increasing and your breathing getting shallow, is to focus on our breathing. Partly because it's super easy, right? It's completely free. We always have access to our breathing. And one beautiful thing about it is people can't really tell that you're doing it. If you wanted to go into a deep meditation in the moment, people might notice that you're closing your eyes or you're starting to chant or something. But by just changing our breathing, we can do it at any time. And so really the science behind it, I'll cover really quickly and then just give a couple of different ways to practice it. When we slow down our breathing, it's called low and slow or diaphragmatic breathing. We're slowing down our heart rate. We can change how fast our heart is beating. And in that moment of pressure and stress, it's increasing. So we want to slow it down. But what's actually happening is when we slow down our breathing, we activate what's called the vagus nerve. It's the largest nerve that connects our brain to all of our organs, our heart, our gut, our kidneys, all of our internal organs. So when we slow down our breathing, we literally flip that switch between the stress response and the relaxation response. And the way we turn it on is by slowing our breathing with an inhale of about 4 seconds, inhaling through your nose about 4 seconds. And then I like to practice exhaling out of my mouth, because if you're anything like me, and a lot of people I know, we hold a lot of tension in our jaw, grind our teeth at night. We have those tension headaches because the tension is so built up in our body, unconsciously, that we hold our jaws really tight. So exhaling out of our mouth, 4, 5, or 6 seconds. The key is to exhale longer than we inhale. That's what actually flips the switch of the vagus nerve. So there are great tools. I actually recently invested in this beautiful necklace, which it actually, you breathe through it. So it slows down your breathing and encourages slower breathing. The Navy SEALs use this tool called box breathing, where they just picture a box. You kind of have a rhythm in your head. Inhaling for 4, exhaling for 5 or 6 seconds. And you'll find your own rhythm. There's different comfort levels for different people. But our breath is our superpower in the moment, but also more proactively as well.
Julie, was there a question or a comment?
Just an observation that we're losing person-to-person contact, the interpersonal touch that eliminates all our misconstrued texts, emails, because facial expressions and the tone of voice is unavailable and attached. We can't always interpret what we meant when we can't see each other.
Yes, I think actually, Jeff, your colleague Sarah Ross talks a lot about this too, that we tend to interpret emails and texts much more negatively than they actually intended. That's a really important point.
Well, it's because the brain focuses on negative first. It's just built that way.
Yeah.
It focuses on positive. And for regulate your breathing, I'm a chronic asthmatic. I have allergies all year long, and chronic asthmatic. So my challenge is getting all the oxygen out of my lungs, getting everything out of my lungs so that I can take a deep breath. But pursed breathing for me was something I had to learn very quickly, very fast, just to be able to maintain my asthma and to manage it when it got out of whack. And then over the years, I've learned this pursed breathing, as well as what Dee is saying, holding that breath in and letting it out very slowly, and doing that 3 times. There's actually something called the SOSS method, which is when you are emotionally hijacked, or when you're in a situation that feels like it's going to trigger a threat, you stop, you oxygenate. You get as much oxygen as you can into the brain, and that blood flow increasing. Then you shift your thinking into something that you're grateful for. So you automatically are focusing outside of that situation. And that helps you be able to manage those emotions. Now, one of the things that we want to make sure we stress here, you can manage your emotions. You need to learn your triggers, what's setting things off, and then to retrain the amygdala not to respond that way with those triggers, but instead to respond in a different way that allows the logical part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobes, to do what it does best. Do you have anything you want to add there?
No, I think that was well said.
So, my question to you is, what's your takeaway from today? What's your takeaway from today? If you would type in a response, we'd appreciate it. And I'm actually going to stop here, Julie, so that you can do your question as well at the end of the presentation.
All right. Do you want to unshare, Jeff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Gotten that they love the tips and thank you.
There you go.
Great. Anybody else have any last minute questions or thoughts? Okay, we're going to go to our trivia question then. Did any pop up? I'm looking real quick on chat. So good, thank you, Breathe. Okay, trivia question for all of you. Please type in the chat. Noelle, you are on chat patrol. Before the owners of Metcon started their business in 2011, what business or industry were they in before? The winner of this will receive a $50 Starbucks card or be able to golf with Nick or Tyler. Do we have any answers?
Yeah, it looks like we've got a winner.
Does Michael work for Metcon?
Oh, no.
Michael does.
Oh, no.
Oh, anybody? Okay. Well, I will talk to Tyler and get that squared. Oh, you're the CFO. You should know, Michael, huh?
I have to be disqualified.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, Noelle and I will do a drawing of the
We'll
property managers and stuff. We'll do a quick name slot of everybody that was actually on the call and email out who won the prize. How about that? Non-Metcon employee. Noelle, can you pull that together?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to thank Jeff and Dee for this great session. And we have another one coming up in 2 weeks. We have, I'm trying to remember what this one is. What's the next? Do you have it in the next one?
It's on how to manage emotions during conversations and how to leverage conversations so that you can move forward, and the chemistry that goes on when you're having various conversations in your brain.
Right, virtual fostering conversational cocktails. So yeah. I think that really would. I think the order that we've done these in are really helpful because I think they just keep building upon each other. So I want to thank everybody for attending today and for participating. And we'll see you on October 7th for Fostering Cocktails. Those of you who are doing our wine tasting with a sommelier tonight, we look forward to seeing you at 5. We will have an hour of the sommelier, and then we'll have an hour for networking and finishing up all those bottles of wine. I hope it, and the good thing is everybody's going to be home, so you can just roll on over to your couch and enjoy the rest of your night. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night. Great day.
Oh,
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
thank you.